Thank you,
corporations or
Attorney
anyone
General.
else.
The time for answering the question has expired. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Payne. Will the Minister update the Senate on the Turnbull Government's plans to secure a long-term and sustainable naval shipbuilding industry and workforce in Australia, and how will this benefit the broader Australian economy?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Fawcett very much for his question and his long-term interest in the question of naval shipbuilding in Australia and defence issues more generally. Mr President, today the Prime Minister and I have announced a number of very significant decisions that will secure a sustainable, long-term Australian naval shipbuilding industry. The decisions announced today will provide for 2 shipyards to implement the government's commitment to a continuous build of naval surface ships in Australia. We've announced that the construction of the offshore patrol vessels will begin in Adelaide and Henderson in 2018 to bridge the gap between the end of the air warfare destroyer program and the start of the future frigates, which the government has indicated will commence in 2020. Austal, Mr President, has been selected as the preferred tenderer to construct up to 21 Pacific patrol boats and, subject to negotiations, will begin construction in early 2017 in Henderson. The government has also announced the down-select or shortlist for the designs for both the offshore patrol vessels and the future frigates. Mr President, the government's continuous naval shipbuilding strategy will ensure that Australia as a nation retains a sovereign capability to build and sustain its naval vessels, securing thousands of shipbuilding jobs for decades to come.
Just a moment, Minister. Senator Cameron and Senator Edwards, it's very difficult for me to hear, let alone the Minister to speak, during these interjections across the chamber. So please desist. Senator Payne, you have the call. Senator Cameron.
A strong and sustainable shipbuilding industry will also create thousands more jobs, Mr President, through the breadth of the supply chain and give the industry the certainty to invest and innovate to develop the capability the Navy needs. Mr President, unlike those opposite who did nothing to order or commission a ship from an Australian shipyard in the entire time in which they were in government, this government is getting on with the job and getting the job done.
Thank you, Minister. Order on both sides. Senator Fawcett, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Could the Minister develop that last part of her answer to advise the Senator how this government's naval shipbuilding plans differ from previous approaches to this important industry and sovereign capability?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. That is a very important supplementary question because for too long our shipbuilding projects, our naval shipbuilding projects, have been developed in isolation, which has led to a process of peaks and troughs in demand. And each time there's a trough, industry has gone through a very painful decline. Workers have been let go, resulting in a loss of valuable skills and experience, which means that each time we start a new naval build, we start cold, and it takes time and it takes money to rebuild that lost skills base. What this government's continuous shipbuilding strategy, Mr President, is determined to do is to eliminate that boom-bust cycle that has afflicted the industry for far too long. It'll need to draw on defence. It'll need to draw on state and federal governments. It'll need to draw on industry and workers and educational institutions to train and skill our workforce, research organisations to ensure we have a strong, viable and sustainable sovereign capability to build and sustain our naval vessels
Thank you, Minister. The time
for
for answering
decades
the question
to come.
has expired. Senator Fawcett, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Will the Minister advise what the government's naval shipbuilding plans means for jobs and investment in my home state of South Australia?
Order on my left. Senator Carr and Senator Edwards. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. The South Australian colleagues of mine on this side of the chamber are extremely strong, impressive advocates for South Australia's shipbuilding industry, and Senator Fawcett is no exception. The Turnbull Government's commitment to build at least 2 of the first offshore—
Just pause a moment, Minister. On my left. On my left. Order. on both sides. Order, Senator Cameron. Minister.
As I was saying, Mr President, the Turnbull Government's commitment to build at least 2 of the offshore patrol vessels in Adelaide to help as far as possible, given the current circumstances in which we find ourselves, to bridge that gap between the air warfare destroyer program and the beginning of the future frigate program build is extremely important. It will support the jobs of those highly skilled shipbuilders in Adelaide and de-risk the future frigate program. It is billions of dollars in investment, Mr President. It is thousands of jobs across the supply chain. It is vital for the Centre for Defence Industry Capability, which is headquartered in Adelaide, will be able to assist small to medium-sized industry to understand and respond to the opportunities available to it in the future frigate and OPV projects.
Senator